We met Aline and Bruce from Sailing Yacht Migration in a very remote anchorage in an atoll in the South Pacific. We have been the only two boats. They invited us over for a sunset yoga and we had a meal and a long chat that night. Here in the Marquesas Islands, we met them again and heard more about their story. Welcome to Sailor's Life. Today I'm on Sailing Yacht Migration. She is a Cross 46 trimaran. Bruce bought her in 1990. Very interesting boat and worth looking at it. Keep watching and learn about this boat and their unusual, beautiful trip. Hello, Bruce.
Hi.
Hi.
Come on in.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. You have such an unusual boat. Do you want to show me around a little bit?
Sure. So this is Migration. She's a Cross 46 trimaran from 1969, and she's cold molded mahogany ply with fiberglass skin. And she's really different than a lot of other trimarans. Come and look over here. You can see how wide she is. The main cabin's completely open all the way across.
Wow.
Almost 8 meters across. A bunk on the other side.
So the hulls are open to each other.
Right, a lot of trimarans you would have a wall either right here at the end of the hull or on the end of the bed, but there's living space in the outer hulls, which are called amas on a trimaran. So it gives a very wonderful open feel, and it's what I fell in love with when I first saw the boat. It wasn't like this when I bought the boat. I built this refrigerator and put in a new sink. This is an oven from a recreational vehicle, an RV, which is cool. You don't need a gimbaled stove, and it's been great. Yeah, it's a pretty comfortable galley. This is the nav station here. All the electronics I redid when I bought her. I pretty much redid almost everything. And our chart table has our path across around the Pacific over the last 18 years. Come on back to the aft cabin.
So we go through the cockpit. And that's the aft cabin. Oh, more berth. Fantastic. You can sleep lots of people on that boat.
More than we want to sleep. When the boat was built, this was actually 2 cabins. There was a door here and a door here. There was another toilet between the two where these scuba tanks are, and 2 bunks. But a previous owner had actually opened it up, which makes it very nice. There's no reason for 4 toilets on a boat.
And this is your museum here?
This is our basket museum. We went to the Darien in Panama, and we went way up the river to the little villages where the women do all of this beautiful weaving. And this is the helm. It's got a nice enclosed pilot house, which was a wonderful thing to have when we were in colder areas. You can sit here, there's a leaf that comes up, and you can create a whole bench seat here with cushions, so you can put these side curtains down when it was cold and wet and stay inside. It was fantastic in Alaska. One of the things that Aline and I both love is to go to places that are less visited. And I suppose one of the very first places we did that was Rapa Nui, Easter Island, which after we went through Mexico and Central America, we were in Ecuador, then Panama, and then the Galapagos. And we went from Galapagos to Easter Island. And that was one of the most amazing places we've ever been. It's challenging, but we were lucky, and we moved to anchorages a lot, so we were able to stay there for 5 weeks. And then of course the natural route from there is to Pitcairn and the Gambier, and then we were in French Polynesia. And from then it was kind of the normal route through the islands to New Zealand. Then we went back up and down from New Zealand to the tropics 3 different seasons. And then because we needed to do work because the boat was so old, she was delaminating. She was originally built with polyester resin. We decided to go to Thailand to do a 2-year refit. But after that, we really wanted to get back to French Polynesia. And there's a big question: how do you get to French Polynesia from Thailand? There's several ways you could do it. You can continue westward around the world. You could try to work your way along the equator, but we decided to go north via Taiwan, Japan, the Aleutians, Alaska, and come down the west coast and then back across from Mexico to the Marquesas.
Oh, so that was the reason why you went to Japan and these places. Because that I would have liked to ask you, how did you get the idea to go to Japan?
Well, we always thought it would be interesting to go to Japan, but then because we really wanted to get back to French Polynesia, that was the thing. At the same time, we met a boat that had done that route from Japan, and they said the crossing of the North Pacific was actually a pretty nice sail. They said it was cold and foggy, but the sailing was nice. We thought, well, if that's how it is. We didn't exactly have the same conditions as they did, but we're happy we did it because it was a good adventure.
Let's talk a little bit about Japan. How is the cruising ground in Japan?
Oh, we love Japan. What a big surprise it was. And we love it so much we'll be going back for sure. We'll be heading from here to New Zealand to do work on the boat, do some rigging and things like that. But after that, we'll be heading back to Japan. Japan is such a special cruising ground, and one of the reasons is because not very many boats go there. Now, I think that's going to change a lot in the next few years. There's a lot more attention. I think, unfortunately, when YouTubers discover it, it's going to be a very different world. But the year we were there, we ran into perhaps 7 foreign boats. There were probably less than 20 in the whole country, and we're talking a country as big as New Zealand with 5,000 ports. So you don't see other boats, and because of that, you're very special, and the Japanese people really appreciate that you made the effort to go to Japan. And it is an effort, because one of the reasons people don't go to Japan is because it's not on the way to anywhere. French Polynesia is on the way right across the Pacific. But if you go to Japan, you have to decide, where am I going after that? Either over the top to Alaska or back down south. But, it's not right on those cruising grounds. But it is amazing. And the people were the friendliest, most gracious, generous people we've ever met. We've been to about 26 countries, and I don't think we've been to a country where the people weren't wonderful, but they put the bar very high. It was fun to meet them. I think we're friends with more Japanese people still by email than we are from any other country we've been to.
But how did you communicate? Do you speak English?
So Aline's wonderful about languages. She has a natural facility, and she said, let's learn as much Japan as we can. So 6 months before we got to Japan, when we were still in Borneo and in Indonesia and Malaysia, we started practicing with some videos and some books and things like that. So we had some facility, enough to have those nicety conversations. Hello, how are you? Where are you from? And that goes a long way. I think the Japanese were so grateful that we made an effort. In fact, there were days where, we would go up to people and say, "Ohayo gozaimasu," good morning. And they'd say, "That's amazing, you speak Japanese," but most Japanese, certainly younger Japanese, they all learn it in school. And though they're shy at first, once they see how bad our Japanese is, they certainly will help us with our Japanese and will speak English with them. So it wasn't that bad.
And what about anchoring? Are they based to anchor, or do you have to go into marinas?
Well, marinas are very expensive. But when we came from Taiwan. Taiwan's only a couple hundred miles away from the first place you can check in, Ishigaki, at the very southern chain of the Ryukyu Islands. So what's cool about that is you have a long way to go up this chain of subtropical islands. It was a great surprise to us. It's like, there's coral reefs, there's manta rays and beautiful snorkeling with colorful fish and diving. So all of those places you can anchor. Once you get into the regular part of Japan, it's more difficult. The good news is, though marinas are expensive, fishing ports tend to be free, and there's thousands of them. Well, what it means is you're going to be up against a wall, and sometimes with very high tides and low tides, which makes it challenging. But you can also use satellite charts to find anchoring places. It's not really in the Japanese sailor's mindset to anchor very much, but we did.
Are the Japanese people also into sailing? Are they people who own sailing boats then?
Yeah, that's a great question, because Unfortunately, most of the people who are sailing tend to be 70 and 80-year-old men, because back in the boom years when the economy of Japan was just going crazy, like in the 80s, they all learned to sail and bought boats. So there's these small, very very friendly yacht clubs full of these guys who are just so happy to have you visit. So there are still some young people, but the people who are into sailing do love it. And they tend to hop from fishing port to fishing port or marina to marina. So there is a sailing culture, and they embrace you right away when you come in. They're super happy to share their knowledge. They'll sit down with you with a chart and say, this is the fishing port you must visit because it has this excellent restaurant very close to the marina. Then when we went across the North Pacific to the Aleutians, yeah, it was cold. As you can see, the boat has an enormous amount of volume. There's lots of hatches, which is great right now in the tropics. There's a lot of ventilation. We don't have much trouble with mildew and things like that, but it was impossible to heat up there. We have a Wabasso heater. It's a nice heater, but it takes a lot of power to keep it going all the time. So we would just run it for 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour at night. And the rest of the time, our best friends were hot water bottles. So every night before we went to bed, we would put bottles in the bed. Someone would get up in the morning and boil some water for hot water bottles. But it wasn't terribly cold, only about, the air temperature was often about 10 degrees centigrade, 50 Fahrenheit, but the water temperature is a little bit less than that, like 9 degrees centigrade, 48. And so the boat just never, ever warmed up, and we were very cold. And so we've decided, even though we're going back to Japan, we're not going to take that route because we were too cold for too long.
But do you think it was worth it? Was the tour?
Oh, absolutely. It's such an incredible place. And the Aleutians are not even Alaska. They have their own feel. It's very desolate with these beautiful volcanoes. And then the wildlife in Alaska, absolutely worth it.
And these islands are the first islands you hit when you go up that route in Alaska.
Yes. When people talk about crossing the Pacific, if you cross from, let's say, Japan to San Francisco, it's a huge distance. But if you go Japan to those Aleutians, the first Aleutian island is still almost 1,000 miles away from mainland Alaska. So it's not that far. It's only about 1,700 nautical miles.
So, but like you just said, you did hit a storm?
We had 2 gales. One was very short-lived. One was several days. Nothing more than sustained 30 to 35, but not even for that long. Most of it is, as most people know, it's the seas, it's not the wind, right? And because those lows move in very different patterns and fairly quickly, a lot of times you'll get wind that is going to be consistently moving, but the waves, you got several wave chains, and they were very uncomfortable for some days.
Bruce, can you describe these Aleutian islands in Alaska a little bit?
Oh, yeah. The Aleutians, they're pretty unique, I think. Of course, I haven't been everywhere, but they have a very stark beauty. There's no trees on them, which is the first thing that's very interesting. There's, on some of the taller ones, which are volcanoes, there's snow all year round. And because they're very conical shaped volcanoes with the stripes, the ridges are dark black lava with snow between them, so you get this beautiful white and black contrast. The lower ones have scrub. There's some reindeer on some of them, elk on some of them. It's a very strong wild beauty, and you feel, because especially in the winter you get 40, 50, 60, 70 knot storms coming across the North Pacific, and they're windswept, and you see it. But you also get lots of water. So there's waterfalls falling into the ocean. Just hiking around, there's tundra, that soft stuff you're walking over. It's really cool. Plus, there's an incredible history there, because the Aleutian Islands are the only place there's ever been a war, an international war on United States soil. There was, before it was the United States, with the Spanish, and a long time ago. But part of World War II was fought in the Aleutians. The Japanese actually took over 2 of those islands. So there was a lot of activity up there, and there's still a lot of that. There was a huge naval base on Adak, which is no longer there, but all the facilities are there being crumbled by the wind, 2-story apartment houses that have had the sides ripped off by these crazy winds. There's an island that we went to where you anchor. It's very beautiful. There's a berm off the beach, and you climb over the berm, and there's a B-17 bomber just sitting right there that was shot down in pretty good condition. I mean, the hydraulic fittings aren't rusty. So there's a lot of history, and there's hot springs because of the volcanic activities. There's still volcanoes that are erupting now. So it's a pretty awesome place.
And how is the provisioning like if you go in places like that?
Well, there is one store in Adak. Most of the islands, of course, are completely uninhabited, and pretty much there's nothing between Adak, which is toward the end of the chain, and Dutch Harbor, which is on the inner end of the chain. Dutch Harbor is a huge place. It's where so much fishing happens. But Adak only has about 50 or 70 people, and it's very, very expensive. It made Japan and certainly makes French Polynesia look cheap. So not so great. But we also didn't spend that much time there. If you had an expedition boat that had a nice diesel heater that you could heat the whole boat, you might spend the winter in Alaska. But we have a wood boat. She's glass over ply. She doesn't like the cold air, especially a big plywood deck like this. With snow falling on it, we would be sure to get lots of cracks and have to deal with a lot of problems. So we weren't going to spend the winter there. So we needed to make it from the north of Japan, from Hokkaido, all the way to San Francisco in California between June and December, or really the end of November. Okay. It's a long way, thousands and thousands of miles. So we probably, I would say almost every single stop we were in, we would want to stay a week or 2, and we could stay 1 or 2 days because there's so many thousands of miles to cover. And that was sad. So because of that, once you're in Alaska, the provisioning's easy as. But the Aleutians, there's not much there. But we moved through the Aleutians in about a month. And, on a boat, you always have what you need. And the great thing about it being so cold is, it's the summertime. So the sun's up a lot. You're getting a lot of solar power. And when it's 10 or 12 degrees in the cabin, the refrigerator doesn't have to work hard at all.
Why is your boat called Migration?
That's a good question. And I think it has a good story too. So I'm a children's book writer, and I sold my very first children's book to a publisher in 1987. I didn't have a boat then, but I knew since I was about 14 or 15 years old that someday I would be cruising. And so everything I thought about was someday I'm going to find a cruising boat. The book that I sold to that publisher, my first book I sold, was called The Cherry Migration. There it is. And the publisher gave me a $500 advance on publication against royalties. And I took that advance and I put it in the bank, and I said, this is the beginning of the bank account to buy a boat. So when I did finally buy a boat several years later, I named her Migration and painted her red.
Did you write more books?
Yeah, I've published 14 books, and then I stopped publishing for quite a while because I've been sailing. I started writing more sailing articles. I've written technology articles for writers, things like that. But I'm writing again, and maybe I'll publish some more.
Then you were one of the first boat office people.
I
working
guess.
Remote.
I guess. And back then, I sent in stories via the ham radio using a Pactor modem. You could, compress a Word document.
Oh my God! Yeah, that was another world.
Yes, definitely another world.
So you're sailing how many years?
This is our 19th year.
19th year.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give people who want to start sailing and traveling now?
Ooh, what advice would I give people? Well, number one, do it sooner than later. By now, we've met thousands and thousands of cruisers. We've never met one cruiser who said, I wish I had gone sailing later. We've met a whole bunch of them that said, I wish I had gone cruising earlier. So that's for sure. I left when I was 45 years old. Aline was about, I think, 40 when she first left, So that's, I think, really important. Go. Don't wait for the boat to be done. It will never be done. It certainly gets better. And for those who are just starting out, I'd say give it 3 years, because people get really overwhelmed. Everything on the boat that's breakable will break in those first 3 years, but then you kind of catch up, and there's this place where things calm down, and you still always are fixing things, but it's not like those first years that feel very overwhelming. We've met people who those 3 years kind of make them stop cruising because it feels like that's their life, is fixing the boat. Our happiest times, we don't have Starlink, our happiest times are when we don't have a 4G signal, we do have our Iridium Go, and we can get weather, because weather's super, super important. But to not surf the net, to not check your phone every 5 minutes, to not look at the news, it puts you in touch with this world, which is why you came out here, to get rid of that world where everybody's living in with the news cycle and stuff. Get out of it and look at the moon and the stars and the sea and the tides, and turn the phone off.
Much, Bruce. I think it was really interesting thoughts and stories you told us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to participate in Sailor's Life.
You're welcome. If you have any more questions that we haven't discussed yet, please write them in the comments so that I can ask my next interview partners about them. Subscribe my channel Sailor's Life if you want to hear more facts, experiences and stories. Give me a thumb up and press the bell if you don't want to miss any of these informations.